Welcome to our podcast. For those of you that have not joined us, welcome. My name is Matthew Eubank, and my co-host is Anna Rose. Say hi to everyone, Anna.
Hi.
We will be imparting on a journey as usual as we give you the perspective from average Americans that listen to debates, news, podcasts, and other endeavors to broaden our minds. This broadcast is a little bit special as we will rehash some lessons learned during the Information Literacy and Critical Thinking course. Also, we get to discuss the content in one of our favorite podcasters, Sam Harris. Anna, why don't you tell the folks how you discovered this podcast and what the topic for this week was?
A friend of mine at work recommended him to me as somebody who is thought-provoking. I've listened to his podcasts and learned that he's a neuroscientist, a philosopher, and an author of several books I haven't had time to read yet. I like how his podcasts focus on the world and how it tries to change us. As for our topic today, it's one of my favorite people in the world, Donald Trump.
Yet there is a bit of spin on today. Sam's guest was Scott Adams, and he was taking the side that Trump is a master of persuasion, and that his defense of Trump is built upon the notion that his lying, manipulation, and con of the people is actually a masterful wielding of, as Scott put it, is a skill set we have yet to see before in the presidential office. Take a quick listen.
Because he has a set of skills and a talent that we've never seen before, meaning that nothing like this has ever been in the political realm that we've seen. So what he can do is probably different from what a regular politician can do, both on the upside and the downside, I would think. So I'm not discounting that there's greater risk with a President Trump than some vanilla president.
So Scott continues past this point, stating his big deal offers are just part of Trump's persona, and that he truly does not mean to make right on the first ludicrous offer, yet to come around to something most can agree on. As Scott puts out, the right has been moved by President Trump towards the middle, and that was his intent all along. He knows he does not have the ear of the left, however.
I've been horrified by this, and from the poll you took in statistics, it seems like most of our friends agree.
Well, that information was supposed to be a surprise, yet the poll was conducted and is very relevant to how we were asked to look at information from various sources. I conducted a random blind convenience poll that captured 74 respondents via SurveyMonkey. Amongst the survey, the ages spanned 65 to 24, male and females, stratified over various incomes and various other monikers akin to a random poll of such. No one was paid, yet those who responded should be given an air of bias just from being motivated to respond. Of the 74, only 71.62% stated they did not vote for Trump. 21.83% did, and on a scale of 1 to 5, only 4 respondents rated the president a 5 or total trust. A whopping 32 reported a 1 or no trust at all. Lastly, the poll asked an open-ended question regarding what respondents thought was the most important topic when looking at trust in the presidency. Effects on transparency, international relationships, and many open answers pointing to reliability were present.
So, does this poll relate to the topics in your class regarding who and where information comes from?
Excellent question. This poll was a very amateur poll, yet I believe it correlates well with what we are seeing in the news and amongst others that try to be informed and objective. So, simple answer is no. This is not information to be trusted, yet as always, we are urged to compile sources and evaluate for the truth. Usually for me it lies somewhere between what opposing channels provide along with a healthy dose of the National Public Radio. Turning to such data, we can look at a recent Fox poll, finding more Americans trust the White House than the media by a difference of 7%. Small, but for them significant. 56% of the Democrats polled trust the media more, yet a whopping 9% of Republicans trust the press. CNN reacted with results of their own. When asked whether they trust Trump or the Washington Post, the New York Times more. The newspaper won by 9 points amongst all adults. And when Trump is pitted against ABC, CBS, NBC, the networks were judged more trustworthy by an 11-point margin. Seems we have opposing positions based on where you get your news.
So, getting back to the podcast, I'm even more intrigued how Sam's podcast seemed to switch from the pro-Trump stance to the absolute dead set against him. It seems that they kept pretty on balance.
Yes, the concept introduced by the guest Scott Adams was the best analogy I've found to describe the dipole we keep seeing in the news and randomly through people we speak with. Let me play a small part to discuss.
We continue down this line. I want you to describe this analogy that you've made, which I think is very useful. I mean, you have this two different moves.
As a cognitive dissonance cluster bomb. And what it did was it split the United States and to some extent the rest of the world into what I call two movies that are running simultaneously on one screen. So if you imagine we're all in the audience, but half of the audience is looking at the same screen that you and I are, and half of them are seeing one movie, and the other half are watching an entirely different movie. In one of the movies, we had just elected Hitler or something like it, and people were taking to the streets to say, "Oh my God, the world is going to be on fire." And another half of the country were saying, "Hey, we got a guy who's probably going to be pretty good on jobs, and maybe he'll tighten up the borders and do some business-like systems in government that we like." And that's all they saw.
I really love the description of cognitive dissonance, and that we make a mindset of the way the world works, then someone like Trump comes along and shows how well people can be ensnared in their own narrative. I would not say I was in either theater as described by Sam. I would say I was watching both movies together and blending pieces of things will be fine with then switching to utter horror. According to our text in class, page 41 talks of this term of bias towards what confirms your personal view. Maybe I did learn something in my information class.
I totally identify with the theater that's playing the horrible Hitler film with the world on fire. I can't see that Trump truly is a good president or that he has our best interests at heart. You know I always weigh information and try and stay informed.
Well, I've been hoping he would just keep his mouth shut and get to work. Thankfully, I can see that he has made some positive movements, such as, again, moving the right towards accepting limited bans, strengthening the border instead of deporting 120 million people immediately, and trying to help the economy along instead of building an expensive wall or placing tanks on the border. Yet, add in his mouth firing off about so many things, and the positives, they just vanish.
So the best part of Sam's piece was him being a bit of a sounding board for Trump haters, and now he has moved to truly find somebody that's able to articulate and be mindful of presidential support. Yet Mr. Adams describes Trump as a master of persuasion, whereas Sam sees a guy who's swallowed by greed, self-delusion, and probably a brain virus.
And for me, this is where the open debate turned to a horrible realization that I told you about. That if all of the lying, deception, and general disregard for telling the truth was by design, that for me, that was even worse. I would hearken for the days of bumbling Bush or even take the overstep of Obama before trusting a man who by design has no desire for facts, no needs to apologize for misgivings, and moves on his own closed cognitive dissonance, and is our president. Listen to Sam as he answers the best question.
Sam, let me ask you this. At what point in the process did you decide that he was incompetent to be president?
That is a great question. I love that question. That is my favorite question ever asked of me on this podcast. I guess let's focus on the master persuader idea, because here's the movie I'm in. All right, you've said that Trump is the greatest persuader you've ever seen. I think you actually wrote. I think I saw this in a blog post of yours that you wrote that if Steve Jobs was a 10, Trump is a 15. I think I have that right. Okay, so here's the movie I'm in, and this predates this election by at least a decade. I find Trump one of the least persuasive people on earth. I mean, long before he ran for president, he struck me as nothing more than an odious con man. He strikes me as an absolutely despicable person.
I think the part that Sam was trying to get at was that he may have started and ended with bias. I guess you just need to keep searching for the in-between.
Yep. Well, that's all the time we have, folks. Don't stop looking for the truth. Evaluate your sources of information. Always look for bias, because if you've become biased, you're no longer in the in-between where knowledge is power.